Hi everyone, welcome to video number 34 in my Richard Laymon horror novel review series. Today I'm talking about Blood Games from 1992. So there is the cover art by Steve Crisp. What I really like about this is it's a rare example where the painting, the cover art, takes up the vast majority of the cover. They haven't squashed it up like they sometimes do. It's very well detailed. You can't really see it here, my video is very low quality, but it's exactly as Laymon describes it in the opening chapters, even to the hunting knife there that's buried into the totem pole, the lopsided totem pole, the winding path, the forest on either side. It's really well done, and for a while the original painting was for sale on eBay for about £650. I was very tempted to pick it up, but I couldn't justify to my wife spending that much money on a painting like this to hang on the wall. So anyway, yeah, Blood Games, a really cool cover art. It comes in at 470 pages, and here is the synopsis. It says, they meet up for 1 week every year: Helen, Cora, Vivian, Finley and Abilene. 5 former co-eds in search of thrills and adventure, just like they enjoyed together at college. This time it's Helen's choice. Helen, the fat girl with a taste for horror. The brainy one, with a fear of being caught alone in the shower by an unknown assailant with a sharp knife and a thirst for blood. For this year's reunion, Helen has picked the Totem Pole Lodge, a deserted hotel in the backwoods with a sinister past. She's looking forward to the moment when she'll tell the others the gory details. But that's before night falls and the girls find the lodge is not as deserted as they thought, and before Helen goes into the shower alone. Yeah, well, as you can probably see, this is a very much read book. I bought this brand new as a teenager, and this is a book that I read, of all Laymon's books, probably the most when I was a kid. But I hadn't read it in many years since I was a teenager, so very interesting to revisit it. I loved it very much when I was young, and going into this series of Laymon reviews, I thought that this was going to end up being my number 1 Richard Laymon novel. At the end of this series, I'm going to be doing a ranking from 35 to 1, and I thought this was going to be a lock-in for number 1. So let's see how it's aged then, because there is a huge difference between reading Laymon as a teenager and reading him as an adult. So the story of this then, 5 friends, all female, they make a kind of pact after graduating university that they will meet up every year for a week for fun and adventures. And each member of the group will take turns to decide what they do. And the main part of the book is Helen's choice. She's arranged for them to spend the week in an old abandoned lodge out in the middle of nowhere, which has a very murky history of death and Laymon-esque mayhem. The kind of mayhem that in the real world it would have seen the place bulldozed and a nuclear testing site built over its place, but here it's just left in mostly pristine condition, including a lovely indoor swimming pool full of the purest spring water. Midway through the book, spoilers, let me just quickly say, if you haven't read the book, go and do it now, shut this video off and read it, because I recommend you read it. But there's really no way to talk about this book and what's good about it and what isn't good about it without going into major plot points, so spoilers alert. Anyway, so midway through the book, Helen goes missing and she later turns up dead, and the rest of that part of the story is finding out who killed her and confronting the murderer. So that's the main bulk of the book. Interspersed with that main story are flashback chapters, where we see the girls' university days and we see how they met each other, how and why they bonded. Laymon, by his standards, fleshes out their characters a bit. He uses these chapters not only to tell usually funny and exciting short stories involving the girls, but also to show that this is a tight group. This is a close-knit group of friends who, through various trials and tribulations, have come to see each other as family. And while some reviewers online have said they found those flashback sections, a bit boring and superfluous, I actually disagree. Firstly, because I really like these characters, but more importantly, I think Laymon recognized that his ending was going to involve the girls making a very risky choice to stay and fight, rather than simply walk away and let the police handle it. And that choice that they made was founded upon this kind of sisterhood that they've created among themselves, this willingness to die for one another if need be in the course of avenging one of them. So let's talk about the characters then. This is a bit of an unusual one, this book, because usually when I criticize Richard Laymon's novels, it's the characterization that I criticize, almost never the story. he almost always has a story, but not the characters. Here it's the other way around. Here he has the characters, but arguably not quite a strong enough story for them. I'll get to the story a little bit later, but in the beginning it seemed that the five girls were going to be the usual one-dimensional Laymon cliches. Laymon in this book does his usual thing of first introducing us to the new female characters by how they look and how attractive they are. For the first few characters, the way I differentiated these five girls was Vivian, hottest woman to have ever walked the planet. Cora, second hottest woman to have ever walked the planet. Abilene, very hot woman. Finley, very hot woman and kind of slutty. Helen, fat, ugly, and therefore unlovable. Yeah, Laymon was not a progressive in his body-shaming tendencies. And but despite that, over the course of the book, he does actually, like I said, flesh them out, and they do come to have their own individualism, and they are, again, by his standards, well-defined characters, separate from one another. Let me go to what I was saying about the story. It's a little bit too long, this book, by about 100 pages. Laymon has these girls speaking far too much superfluous dialogue. And how superfluous this is emphasized by its opposite, by moments in the book of real tenderness and kind of almost psychological insight, such as there's a flashback sequence that takes place in New York City. I love that chapter. It's one of my very favorite passages in all of Richard Laymon, and I know that there are people who really dislike it. They say that it's absolutely pointless and has no bearing at all on the story. That's true. It doesn't have any bearing on the story. But I thought it was a very well-constructed piece of suspense writing with an unexpected ending, which was, again, by Layman's standards, a subtle window into Helen's suffering and loneliness among her four, at least superficially, beautiful and popular friends. But yeah, anyway, I was talking about why the story's a bit too long. It's because there is too much pointless, aimless dialogue going on. If you cut that out, you've shortened the book already by about 70 pages. There are a couple of scenes where they go hiking off to meet this oddball character called Batty. And even though the scenes where they are with Batty are really good, getting to them is just too long. Again, it's just far too much hiking. And one of the things I love about this book is the all-female cast, because it means that there are far, far less, breast fixation, which was a big Richard Laymon thing. There's only one real instance in this book where I rolled my eyes, and it involves one of those very lengthy hikes through the forest to Batty's house, because for some bizarre reason all the girls decide to strip off their tops and just walk topless through the forest. And I think one of the characters, Abilene, we have her like internal monologue, and she's worrying that, oh my god, I feel so uncomfortable. What if somebody's looking at me? I'm topless, I'm exposed. Well, then why are you doing it, is my question. And of course the answer is because we are characters in a Richard Laymon novel. But it was just, that was really the only instance where Richard Laymon's breast and nipple fixation reared its very ugly and unwelcome head. Other than that, it was really nice to not have almost any men in this. Just, nobody always appraising how women look and how their, breasts and nipples behave under various conditions. So that does, but talking about that then, that does bring me to one more negative of the book, which I didn't pick up on as a kid, but I do now. And again, it is this kind of very non-PC body shaming of Helen, the fat, even like introduce her on the back here as saying, what does it call her? Helen, the fat girl with a taste for horror. That's her character trait right there, fat girl. There's a sequence here in a flashback scene where there's this, we're supposed to believe, very sensitive poet guy who spots Helen all alone, and he decides to write her an impromptu love poem, which she ends up reading. And the poem kind of compares her to a flower which is unloved and unpicked, and because of her appearance, of how she looks. And she, of course, falls head over heels in love with him. She thinks it's a lovely thing he's done, but it's kind of really offensive what he's done, actually. Like, why would you assume? You don't know anything about her. You've just taken one look at her appearance. Why would you assume that she's unloved and unpicked by anybody? Later on, we find out that Helen's husband, Frank, is very, very verbally and psychologically abusive to her because of her weight. So the girls come up with the master plan of helping her to lose weight so that Frank will go crazy for her. Which, maybe lose Frank first and then the weight if it bothers you. I think that ought to be the priority here. Frank sounds like a thoroughly unpleasant human being, and you shouldn't be doing a single thing for his benefit other than leaving the piece of crap to die alone. Didn't like that because, again, it's a yet another instance of Laymon just constantly mocking in some way people who are overweight or unattractive in some way. Writer of his time, you could argue that, but then again, you couldn't, because 1992, compare what people like Stephen King were writing at that time, or other horror writers of that era. They weren't quite this backwards in their thinking. All right, anyway, so that's that. Any other negatives I can think of? Not really. Story a bit too long. What else? It's a very unwelcome mention of Donald Trump in this book, which I wasn't expecting. It's a scene in New York City. I was not expecting to see his name leap out the page on me. A book written in 1992, having just drawn the curtain on that chapter of human history. But anyway, so there's that. But I'll say no more about that. Yeah, so all right. I think that'll just about do it for the negatives, because I do want to end up on a positive. Oh no, one other negative I'm afraid I need to say. The ending is a bit contrived. I've no idea what the killer's plan was here, because if one of the girls, Finley, hadn't done something monumentally stupid, then I don't quite get how he was planning to have his way with them. Laymon sets up Finley's dumb action in the flashback chapter immediately before the big finale, showing that she's sometimes prone to losing her head and doing very, very dumb things when she's horny. So I can't say it came out of nowhere, but it was, like I said, very, very contrived. And also a little bit contradictory, because if this guy was the killer all along and was hoping to rape and murder them all, then why was he trying to scare them off the previous night by tossing all their clothes into the pool? And also, this kid must be the world's greatest method actor to have had them convinced all this time that he was actually just a scared young boy, whereas in fact he's apparently a cold-blooded mass murderer who's butchered dozens of people, including his entire family. But I've said it 33 times before in these 34 videos, and here's number 34, we don't go to Laymon for realism. And if you do, you're missing the point of his books, or at least you're missing out on what's enjoyable in them. So let me end then on a positive. What I love the characters. This is my favorite group of characters in a Laymon novel. I do like the setting, especially the swimming pool. As unrealistic as it is that there would still be a pristine swimming pool there after all these years. I loved it. Not far from where I am, there is a creepy hotel, just like in this book, which has a very creepy swimming pool indoors. And I like to go there sometimes. In the late evening, it closes at 11 p.m. I'm usually the last person there, the only person there if my wife doesn't come with me. And it's got these enormous windows which look out onto this creepy as hell forest, which right now is pitch black and covered in snow. It's a very eerie place, very thrilling, but very eerie place. And this swimming pool in this book reminded me of it. What else? I seem to be one of the very few readers of this book that love the flashback scenes, all of them. I've already mentioned the New York City scene, but there's another one that stands out where Finley, who wants to be a filmmaker, she's making a short horror film based on a short story called Mess Hall, written by an author whose full name isn't given in the book, but with whom she corresponds by letter, and he signs his name Dick, which of course is short for Richard. So, a writer called Richard, short story called Mess Hall. Let's take a look over here. Richard Laymon, Out Are the Lights, and there it is, Mess Hall, the second story in this book. And it was great to see that, because I love Mess Hall, the short story, and what he's done here is he's written a lengthy chapter where we get to see the filming of that short story. It's a huge regret to me that Laymon's novels didn't receive the straight-to-VHS treatment in the 80s and early 90s. I think that they would have been ideal for kind of, very, very low-budget slasher fare like we got in the 80s. Anyway, so I do think that's going to wrap this one up. Blood Games. It was one of my very favorite books as a teenager of Richard Laymon, if not my very favorite. It is going to figure very, very highly in my final ranking. I don't know, will it be number one? We'll see about that. Right now, I am really torn between my head and my heart. What I know in my head to be his greatest book, but what in my heart I kind of love slightly more. But anyway, we'll see about that, because there's just one more review to go, which will be coming soon. And that'll be the last one. That'll be the end of this journey. And then I'll do the ranking video, and then I'll do a couple of videos on his short stories. So, all right. Blood Games, 1992. Thanks very much for watching this. If you did watch it to this point, it's been a long one. Take care of yourselves, everybody. I will talk to you again soon. Bye for now.